we are in 11.2 and we're doing the quadratic formula. First objective is to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is written as x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. The a, the b, and the c are the coefficients, so a is the leading coefficient, b is from the middle term, and c is a number hanging out by himself. We can use the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations. Here's the example. It says solve using the quadratic formula. We have x squared plus 8x plus 15. So let's identify the a, which is 1, b, 8, and c, 15. So we're going to have x equals, well, negative b, which is negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 8 squared, so 8 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times 1. So now we have negative 8 plus or minus 64 minus 60 all over 2. And of course 64 minus 60 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. So this becomes 2. So now we have negative 8 plus or minus 2 all divided by 2. And you're going to have two answers. So the first is going to be negative 8 plus 2, which is negative 6, over 2, which is negative 3. And then the second answer is going to be negative 8 minus 2, which is negative 10, over 2, which is negative 5. So x equals negative 5 and x equals negative 3. Another example, it says 2x squared equals negative 4x plus 5. And of course, we're going to solve using the quadratic formula. So before we can use the quadratic formula, we need all terms on the same side as your square. So add 4x on both sides, and then subtract 5 on both sides. And you'll get 2x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. A is 2, B is 4, and C is negative 5. And then we use the quadratic formula, so x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 5, all divided by 2 times 2. So remember that your quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So this becomes negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 40, all divided by 4. So now we have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 56 divided by 4. So now we need to simplify the square root of 56. 56 can be broken down into 4 times 14. So the square root of 56 is the same as saying the square root of 4 times the square root of 14, which is going to be 2 square roots of 14. So now we have x equals negative 4 plus or minus 2 square roots of 14, all divided by 4. So since 4 is dividing everything, split it up into 2 parts. So we have negative 4 over 4, which is negative 1, plus or minus. 2 over 4 is a half, and then square root of 14. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus 1/2 the square root of 14. Objective 2 says use the discriminant to determine the number and types of solutions. Your discriminant is found by doing b squared minus 4ac. So the value that's underneath the square root in this quadratic formula. If b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, so this means positive. If your discriminant is positive, then you have two unequal real solutions, meaning that you're going to end up with two x-intercepts. If your discriminant is equal to 0, then you're going to have one real solution, meaning you only have one x-intercept. And then the last one says if your discriminant is less than 0, so negative, you will have two imaginary solutions, therefore having no x-intercepts. So you can have two real solutions, one real solution, or two imaginary solutions. Here's an example. It says for each equation, compute the discriminant, then determine the number and types of solutions. So this is part A, and it says 2x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. So A is 2, B is negative 4, and C is 3. So now let's evaluate or compute the discriminant. And it's going to be b squared, so we have negative 4 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 3. So we have 16 minus 24, which is negative 8. So our discriminant is negative, therefore we're going to have two imaginary solutions. And then part B, now we have 4x squared equals 20x minus 25. Before we can do our discriminant, we need to have all terms on the same side as our squared. So subtract 20x on both sides and add 25. So subtract 20x, add 25. And now you have 4x squared minus 20x plus 25 equals 0. A is 4, B is negative 20, and C is 25. So now we can compute the discriminant, and it's going to be negative 20 squared minus 4 times 4 times 25. So this is 400 minus 400, which is 0. Therefore, we have one real solution. Okay, objective 3. Now we're going to determine the most efficient method to use to solve a quadratic equation. So, the first one says, if you have your quadratic equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where ax squared plus bx plus c can be easily factored, the method is going to be to factor and use the zero product principle. If it's in the form ax squared plus c, where there is no middle term, then you're going to use the square root property. Isolate the squared expression, take the square root on both sides, and do not forget the plus or minus. If it is in the form u squared equals d, this time you have a squared expression on the left side. As in their example, you have x plus 4 whole thing squared. In this case, you would use the square root property by taking the square root on both sides. And do not forget the plus or minus. And then the last method is the quadratic formula. You can use the quadratic formula for all equations in any form. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Alright, objective 4. It says write quadratic equations from solutions. So this is a zero product principle in reverse. So if you know a equals 0 or b equals 0, then the product AB has to equal 0. So it says write a quadratic equation with the given solution set. So step 1, you're going to set x equal to each solution. So you have x equals negative 5 over 6. And then you have x equals a third. And then step 2, you're going to move everything to the same side as x. So we're going to add 5 over 6 on this equation. And now we have x plus 5 over 6 equals 0. And then for this equation, we're going to subtract a third. So now we have x minus a third equals 0. And then step 3 is to use the zero product principle in reverse. So if we have two things, so if x plus 5 over 6 equals 0, and x minus a third equals 0, then the product, x plus 5 over 6 times x minus a third, also equals 0. And then the last step is to multiply this out by foiling. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 1/3 is negative 1/3 x. And then you have plus 5 over 6x. And then minus 5 over 18 equals 0. Simplify by combining your like terms, your middle terms. So you have x squared plus a half x minus 5 over 18 equals 0. And here's your quadratic equation. Okay, so here's another example. It says write a quadratic equation with the given solution set. So now our solutions are negative 7i and 7i. So the first thing we're going to do is set both equal to x. So we have x equals negative 7i and x equals 7i. Then we're going to move everything to the same side as x. So we're adding 7i in the first equation. So now you have x plus 7i equals 0. And then you're subtracting 7i in the second equation. So now you have x minus 7i equals 0. Step 3 is the zero product principle in reverse. So now x plus 7i times x minus 7i equals 0. And then of course our last step is to multiply it out. So use FOIL. So x times x, which is x squared. And then we get minus 7ix plus 7ix minus 49 I squared. Our middle terms cancel out. Remember that I squared is the same as saying negative 1. So now we have x squared plus 49 equals 0. And here's your quadratic equation. Okay, so this will conclude our video for 11.2. Please email me if you have any questions.